And hello there, and welcome to another edition of Ask Me Hey D. This is Greg Christopher. I'm Dave Horger, and let's start with football. This whole thing is the bowl picture, the conferences. It's all very convoluted as far as I'm concerned. So let's start. One of the questions pertained to changes in the BCS, including the playoff possibilities and how it might affect the Mid-American Conference. So.
Well, what you said just a second ago is absolutely dead on. You know, if you thought last summer was exciting, this summer is starting to play out in similar fashion. Last summer it was the BCS conferences shaking up. This summer seems to be the playoffs, and then also the non-BCS conferences shaking out. But I think the horse is out of the barn, even though it's not official. There will be a playoff, so it looks like a Final Four is coming to college football of sorts. Now they're working on the nuances of, if you would have said a month ago it was going to be it was going to be institutional sites for those semifinals, and then the Big Ten has done a 180, and now it looks like it's going to be probably folded into the bowl system somehow, some way. But we are going to have a playoff, and I'm also willing to bet if you look at the history of professional sports, college sports, once you start down the path of a playoff, we'll only add teams as time goes on. So if we're having the same conversation 15, 20 years from now, I'm guessing instead of a 14 playoff, it's going to be 8, 12, or 16. That's human nature.
Is that best for college football to have a playoff?
Who knows? It's tough to predict the future, but I think if you look at what's happened to men's basketball, your answer is no. But if you listen to conference commissioners and ADs and television people, this is what the fans want. That's not a great answer. It's an awful answer, really. Okay. But again, if you look at what's happened to men's basketball, the oversaturation, the regular season is less meaningful than it was. If you go back in time, postseason is less meaningful than what it once was. But again, it's there's no point in kind of gnashing our teeth about it because it's here, and now you just figure out the details and try to make it the best that it can be.
Okay, that covers the playoff changes. Conference changes. It seems, certainly just in the last couple of years, teams are going here, dropping there, coming over here. Talk a little bit about that. How does it affect the Mid-American Conference?
So far, it hasn't. I guess you'd say the Temple piece certainly has, but the core 12 it hasn't touched. A fascinating statistic I heard the other day at our conference meetings just late last week. John Steinbrecher said that 25% of Division 1A schools have switched conferences since 2010. And like I said, last summer was all about the BCS schools. Now the non-BCS conferences, the trickle-down effect are shaking out. So that's one piece that you're seeing play out. Conference USA, the Sun Belt, the MAC having some conversations, the WAC obviously being decimated. The other part I find fascinating in all this, Dave, is that now just over the last month or so, all of a sudden we have to defend or it's almost like the MAC has to apologize for being stable.
Yeah, that was my next question.
I mean, we are the tightest knit conference geographically, tightest knit conference financially. The 12 core institutions all look the same. In fact, UMass very much looks the same as the rest of the conference. And the nouveau thing is to be deleting people or adding people, and because we're not doing that, that's seen as bad. So I just find that fascinating. Who knows what's going to happen? I do know this, coming out of our conference meetings, there's a very strong desire. Our television contract is very much tied to having 12 teams. That's a longer story than anybody wants to hear right now, but we need to stay at least at 12. So there's some sense of, 12, 14, 16, thinking in terms of even numbers. Mm-hmm. And the conversations will lead you from there. But I think the next 2 to 3 months, you'll see that John Steinbrecher as our commissioner, we'll take a look at the landscape and see where things go from there. But it's a very tight-knit group. You never know what's going to happen with any individual school. I don't want to speak for the other 12 institutions, but I'm not sure I could predict anything happening right now. And certainly wouldn't do that in this conversation. In a real public way, that's not how something like that should play out.
One of the questions somebody wanted to know pertained to the Ohio State announced they had reported 46 secondary violations, meaning minor violations. Is that a lot? And can you reflect on a school like Bowling Green State University? I'm assuming we have a few of those.
This happened over the weekend, and it's amazing how many comments I've received about Ohio State's secondary violations. My quick view, and I don't pretend to speak for Ohio State, that's not even a news story, in my opinion. We all have secondary violations, and again, without getting into the details, because nobody will want to hear them, when you have a rule book that's 400 some pages thick, you're going to have violations, and it comes down to the secondary violations are unintentional, almost administrative errors in a way. And there's a difference between an intentional violation where someone is trying to cut a corner in some way, shape, or form, and an inadvertent text message. Or, we had a violation last year where literally a recruit was coming to campus with his parents visiting BGSU and was lost, sent a text message trying to contact our coach to get directions to get to campus. The coach texts back, and that's a violation. You have to report it because it's the rule, but that's the type of thing that's a secondary violation. That's why 46 to me is not a news story, and in the context, I don't think it's too many in the sense they've got over 1,000 student athletes, 36 sports. And put that in the context of BGSU, 18 sports, 400 plus student athletes. We report somewhere in the teens every year as far as secondary violations. So 46 didn't seem like a huge number to me. But then again, I didn't even read the story because I saw the headline and thought, oh well.
The rule book, so to speak, is this thick. Why is it that thick? And wouldn't it be a great idea to just kind of scrap all of this and start over and maybe do it right, and the book might be this thick?
That's exactly where the new NCAA, relatively new NCAA president wants to take it, Mark Emmert. And that's part of the bigger legislative reform, which would be a 4-hour conversation if we wanted to have it. But his whole goal is to get rid of a lot of those arcane rules. Not so much arcane, but the reason the rule is that thick, I'll go back to it. I'm not trying to at all sound pessimistic here, but it's human nature that we want to try to legislate morality. That we try to have everything in the kitchen sink in that rule book so that you are boxed into the point that you can't cut corners. And believe me, people are always going to try to find that way to. It is human nature to one up and to be competitive, and we have found over time in college athletics, cut corners. That's the way it is. So from that standpoint, what Mark Emmert's trying to do is you've got to get rid of that, wrapping paper, to a degree, and try to get down just to the core philosophy of what a rule might be. And then, people will operate the way they do. Some people will say that's more of the Wild West. It will be to some degree, but you'll have more of a baseline, what I would call kind of core philosophy and how people will approach from a rule standpoint.
Let's talk a bit about conference changes. Let's switch sports. Let's go to hockey and BGSU's situation, going to the WCHA. Where does all that stand right now? And is the transition going along smoothly at this point?
I sense it's going pretty smoothly. We have regular calls with the other WCHA schools. We've got a conference meeting coming up in June, just up the road in Detroit, where everybody will be around the table. As you can imagine, when you're starting from scratch, it's everything. So a new set of bylaws, we've got to talk about playoff structure, regular season scheduling. So it is very much from the ground up. Now keep in mind, we all are coming from hockey conferences as it is, so the people around the table I think know what they're doing, but it's a matter of just getting everybody on the same page. But it seems to have gone very smoothly. The playoff structure is probably the thing that we're spending the most time on right now. Just the philosophical focus of, should everybody in the playoffs? Are we talking about just a a Final Four, a Final Five, maybe is it campus sites, are we going to neutral sites? So those are the part of the main focal points right now.
Do you think that the more teams in the playoffs, the better?
You know, I have, again, if you stepped all the way back, it doesn't matter whether it's hockey, basketball, baseball, I for one, personally, am not a huge conference tournament fan. You know, I would much rather put more weight on the regular season than the conference tournament. I think if you have to have a conference tournament, and that's a whole nother conversation, it ought to be about preparing the best teams for postseason play. So that's one person's vote. So how that translates to hockey, you know, I'm not sure all 12 teams, 11 teams, 10 teams, whatever number you end up with, you know, need to be in the tournament. And I would say that for basketball as well.
The Big Ten in hockey has announced that they will be using Joe Louis Arena and XL Energy Center in St. Paul for championship sites. What sort of impact does that have on college hockey in general, or than CCHA or the new conference?
That weighs into our conversation, and something that we're taking a look at. You know, with the WCHA and Big Ten essentially flip-flop from year to year because the WCHA is in the XL Center now. Obviously, the CCHA is in Joe Louis, so that is one of the options we're looking at and having conversations with both of those facilities. Not sure it's where we'll wind up, but it is one of the options. I think it's the right move for the Big Ten. Certainly makes a lot of sense as far as the strong hockey footprints within the geography of the Big Ten Conference.
So with the new conference, WCHA, there could be different sites. I'm guessing you would want to have one particular site each year to kind of establish that, or does that matter?
Well, like what the Big Ten's doing, you know, they're going to alternate
right.
sites, which if you go back to, if you look at the history of their basketball tournament, for a time it rotated between Chicago and Indianapolis. I'm not sure this is how the Big Ten will stay forever with hockey either, but for now, in the startup phase, I think it makes a lot of sense to flip back and forth between Detroit and the Twin Cities, the two biggest hotbeds in the Big Ten footprint. Is it something that we do as part of the WCHA? We'll see. But I think it has a lot of merit from that standpoint. But then there's also some other great hockey facilities and great hockey cities and strong support within the footprint of our new conference, the WCHA. So I don't want to get wedded to that being the only option, but it is one of the options that we're looking at.
I believe the last time we spoke was soon after Jennifer Roos was named.
That day,
yeah,
actually.
That's right. How's that transition going? And Ali Mann is coming back to Falcon territory here. So tell us about the transition and new coaches that may be hired soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you'll see the final announcements of Jennifer's staff being filled out, you know, over the next couple of weeks. I would say that we're at a point now probably of final interviews and dotting I's and crossing T's. I know she's having a lot of conversations. But it's been fun to watch Jennifer because she is so detail-oriented, so organized, and had a plan that in one respect, it's been incredibly smooth. In a lot of respects, I would say. The other part, though, is anytime you watch somebody move from the number 2 chair to the number 1 chair, it doesn't matter whether it's an administrative position, coaching position, you know, it's that old advice of you don't know what you don't know until you make that move from the 2 chair to the 1 chair. And, you know, so her reflection on that move, that's going to be an ongoing process over the next year or so. And to watch that over just this short period of time, you can see, you know, a couple of aha moments like, this is what Kurt would always talk about. So, and I know that they talk still regularly, but she's doing a great job. And obviously the transition was probably going to be smoothest and easiest with Jennifer. So from that standpoint, you know, I think, you know, let's get some things knocked out here over the summer, and then we'll get down to basketball in the fall.
The fact that she's very organized and has a plan, that sounds a lot like Kurt Miller.
Absolutely.
And that is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think we've got it all covered today.
All right.
Thank you
Dave.
again. We'll be back next month.
We'll do.